the New World Order, and the conspiracy to cover it up. The shadow government's agenda in keeping us asleep. The injustice, catastrophe, and the global chaos are all indications that we are living in a period of time known as the end of days. Are you looking for answers? They are out there, and together we will find them as we navigate through End Times Now with Bree.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for showing up. Welcome to another episode of End Times Now with Bree. I am Bree. Here is where we oftentimes have the discussion regarding end of times between me, myself, and this microphone. Speaking of having a discussion, I'm looking for some people who have something to say. So please find me on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And of course, you can email me with any ideas, questions, prayer requests, whatever you've got at endtimesnowwithbry@protonmail.com. And then hopefully you run over to Spreaker and you can download this episode and many others. If you didn't catch the last few episodes, be sure to go check them out. It's fascinating stuff, at least to me. Several things that are discussed, many facets of the unseen realm, to some of the nutters out there that have graced our history, as well as aliens, angels, their technology. And, I threw some giants in there because it wouldn't be cool if I didn't throw giants in there, right? And also just remember, I'm not a preacher. I'm not a scholar. I'm just a chick who had some questions and a desire to find some answers. You don't ever have to agree with me. That's okay. I still love you. But I'm always curious to know what other people feel. So, I want to know what are some of the things that you're pondering? What are your most burning questions? Please share them with me because I really want to know. And I'm sure other people probably have the same questions. If I don't have an answer, I'm going to try and find one. Excuse me. But this episode, you guys, is going to be a little different. It's really deep. Okay. It's really deep. In this episode, rather than asking the question, I'm going to make a statement. Well, actually, I'm going to make two statements. And that is transhumanism is possible and transcendence is promised. So we can kind of ponder that just a smidge. But yeah, it's deep. And before I talk about this, I want to add that while we're told that certain technologies don't exist, the chances are that if we've already thought about it, it's already a thing. There are so many examples of this going back farther than 100 years. Many of these technologies are they're based in particle physics and electromagnetic energy, and they're used sometimes simultaneously to accomplish whatever goal it is that quote unquote they are looking to accomplish. And although it's all relative to each other, usually in a specific manner regarding particles and whatnot and how they're manipulated, they have succeeded in a really wide range of applications. And we're talking everything from free energy, anti-gravity, the manipulation of space-time, to regrowing limbs, fixing spinal cords. And then unfortunately, we as human beings, we always have to throw this in there, but weapon systems. And we know this because Tesla had something called scalar technology. And this has been around for a long time. Okay. And it's been replicated numerous times. In fact, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, he passed away, I believe it was July of 2022, but he used this very technology and he was successful at replicating it. What's crazy is that if you go online and read about him, he pops up in some, there's some redacted CIA documents and what have you. But he is just like everyone else that stumbles on something they don't want you getting or your hands on, or, they don't want it getting out for fear of losing control. He is discredited. They discredited him, saying that he never produced a prototype, yada, yada. And they labeled him a wackadoodle. But as God would have it, the truth is out there. And there are lots of people who have replicated this stuff and put it out there for all to see. You can go, and I think it's called Meg, M as in Michael, E-G. So Meg as in Megan. And it's a magnetized anti-gravity, I don't even know. It's crazy. But it was replicated. And some of these guys are just messing around with science, right? And then, of course, some of these guys are actually dead now because, yeah. My point is that the technology to create a reality right out of the Matrix is here. And they just won't come out and say it, that they've accomplished the full Monty yet. Okay, that's what it comes down to. In a 2021 interview with 60 Minutes, prominent World Economic Forum member Yuval Noah Harari, that's Klaus Schwab's right-hand man, if I'm not mistaken. He stated, "We will soon have the power to re-engineer our bodies and brains, whether it is with genetic engineering or by directly connecting brains to computers." I'm good, bro. Or by creating completely non-organic entities, artificial intelligence, which is not based at all on the organic body or the organic brain. And these technologies are developing at breakneck speed. Well, I guess there you have it, y'all. It doesn't need to be based on organic body or organic brain. I mean, I'm yay, let's go. I'm sold. We'll stop by Starbucks first. Okay. I watched this interview with Jordan Peterson and Dr. John Lennox. He's a mathematician. And they go on to have a very intriguing and in-depth conversation. One of the topics touched on was transhumanism. They actually likened it to Luciferianism, and that there's a fine line, But Jordan Peterson makes a comment regarding maturity and how it's connected to sacrifice. He uses Barbara McClintock as an example. And what she did was she isolated herself for many years and studied the different variations of Indian corn, only to come up with what I believe to be something similar to gain of function. I'm not 100% sure on that. All I know is that it's apparently when a cell jumps from one subset of a species to another subset of the same species. I think that gain of function is when a viral load or some sort of a bacterial load jumps from, or cell for that matter, jumps from one species to another species. In this case, I think what she was doing is it's the same species. But regardless, it's kind of the same, the same train track, I suppose. I could be misunderstanding it, but ultimately, what ended up happening was she was able to make a huge breakthrough for cancer treatment as a result of this. So her sacrifice was her time. And so that, we ultimately benefit from that. She had so many other things she could have done, but instead she chose to do that, to isolate herself and stare at corn. Okay. And we benefited from it. That's pretty noble. Anyway, he goes on to say that the dangers of not maturing to a level where we sacrifice of ourselves indicates that we are then destined to remain narcissistic psychopaths. I mean, that is a pretty heavy statement, but when you analyze it, it makes sense. And so I'm gonna continue. The evidence of those who do sacrifice versus those who do not tend not to succeed, which is interesting. And, this seems to be pretty foundational to the overall well-being of human beings, both individually and the species as a whole, right? So what then is to become of us? If we follow that logic that makes this existence solely about us as individuals, right? We're just living just for us. We then realize that we're constantly always thinking about me. And why is this so dangerous? Well, because then the entire world is occupied by narcissistic psychopaths. Like everyone, right? So thank God not everyone is like that. But the idea that we're all gods, okay, which is exactly what transhumanism is. They believe that they can lift us to this place, okay, they can transcend us to this place where we are ultimately all gods, and we're already there. We're already gods. We just have to find that place, right? And that idea has led us down a path in which transhumanism is not only possible, but it's also the goal. It's the goal. It's the goal of people who are proponents of this. And their idea is to change our biological status from the capacity in which we exist currently, which is finite. Okay. There's a finality to us, i.e., we die in this physical realm. And they want to change that so that we, quote unquote, can evolve into a being that doesn't get sick and never dies. And this is a problem for two reasons. Number one, the whole concept of this is a view that's narcissistic at its roots. For an example, I am God and deserve to live forever. That in and of itself, right? Or if we take it a step further and ask a person that takes this view, holds it and perpetuates it, if we ask them this question and say, why do you yourself want this? Okay. What are the chances that they are going to say that they want it for someone else? They want someone else to never get sick, or they want someone else to live forever. I honestly, anytime I've ever heard anybody talking about living forever, it was selfish. It was either I want to live forever, or, well, just hang tight. One of the answers that I have heard is, don't you want, wouldn't it be awesome to never lose your loved ones, right? But I've never heard someone say, I want my mother or husband or child or whatever to live forever. It's always me. And coming from the perpetuator, it sounds something like, don't you want to live forever, right? Etc. At best, we might see something like, imagine your loved ones never getting sick and never dying. But that in and of itself lends itself to the very selfish narcissism that I'm referring to. For example, I miss my dad. I miss my father. He was an amazing man, but he passed away. And so to call him back from a place that he's earned, in my opinion, he's earned it and currently resides there now. That would be a selfish act on my part, right? In other words, to say, wouldn't you want to have your family live forever and never get sick and never die? Well, that's not for them. That's for you. That's a selfish thing. It's not for them. I don't want to live forever. I would be mad at my husband if he did that. Anyway, so the other thing is that it's probably the most evil thing at its core. And it's because that by accomplishing this goal in this particular scenario, at best, we then take away the finality of this realm, whereby then we become a prisoner to it. And as a result, it's that promise of unlimited transcendence beyond this realm it's stolen from us. Because no matter what, there will always be a point of singularity when it comes to AI. It might always be growing, but it will be finite to the very universe in which we inhabit. Why? Because if we adhere to the idea of the evolutionary atheistic view, then we are, by and large, still a product of our environment. And by going against that, demolishes that view. So there is no way then to mathematically step out of that view without coming to the conclusion, and more importantly, acceptance that divine creation is a thing. Because math. Okay? So, as it stands currently, we have two teams in this game to choose from, and they both promise transcendence. They both truly can somewhat be understood, but certainly not fully comprehended to the fullest extent in the mortal human state that we're in. Okay? One promises transcendence into a realm of pure beauty and bliss, a realm outside of space-time, in which our capacity to know and understand literally anything and everything is possible. It's promised. In this particular place, there are things we have never seen before, from colors to creatures to the creator and his cosmos. Maybe it's many cosmos. Who knows, right? But there we are promised to live forever and without sickness and without limits. The alternative to this transhumanism, in which there are also promises of transcendence, sorry, not this transhumanism, the alternative to this is transhumanism, where there is a promise of transcendence. However, it takes place in two parts. The first stage takes place when we're ultimately uploaded to a hub of intelligence, like what's-his-face wants us to be, Klaus's right-hand man. And this hub, it must have a collective in order to thrive, because you can't just hook up one dude and then think that we're good, right? Everybody's got to be hooked up if it's going to go anywhere. But at its best, it's limited to this universe because, as I said before, if we are a product of the very ideas that they're holding, then mathematically we can't step out of that. And so it has limits because the universe has limits. It's finite. We know that it's expanding. And if you hit the rewind button, it will go backwards to a point of singularity, a so-called Big Bang, a let there be light moment, right? So we know it's finite. And although the capacity to manipulate space-time would be a possibility, it would only be within the restraints of our universe. If we stopped right there, okay, which I know this is a lot. Guys, I told you this was going to be deep, okay? But if we stopped right there we could see that this is obviously the lesser of the two options. Okay. There's a lack of dimensionality as well as the limits. They end at best, right? But if we go on to give the benefit of the doubt to this transhumanistic worldview, and we don't mind that our capacity to grow and evolve is finite and determined by our own environment, whereby creating limits to our proverbial consciousness, then we seem to have a bit of a conundrum, whereby we ultimately have to admit that we are not gods, nor would we ever be. And what's more, the fact that our capacity to evolve in and of itself is mathematically flawed because it ends, right? And therefore, it loses all capacity to error correct its code and move beyond its current state. Not even time could remedy that. And the bad news here is that if that's the case, then we're destined to hop around space-time within this realm forever, or we die. Okay? So ultimately, there's that. Okay? But one of the two things has to happen at that point. Either the worldview has to change, which has shattering implications to a Darwinian atheist ideal, or we willingly decide to live in a state of ignorance. Okay, a willful state of ignorance. And sadly, both of those options have the same tragic end. For example, if a proponent of transhumanism realizes that the concept is a means to an end, if only in the first stage of this transcendence, and decides to accept this, then ultimately they denounce the very foundation of the concept of transhumanism. And that is that we're all gods. And they have to denounce that, right? Or the alternative is to then act in a manner that is completely unethical to science. And in and of itself, that is to then make the conscious decision to be willfully ignorant. In other words, our own stubborn nature of pride would result in a willing decision to plug our ears, cover our eyes, and la it all away. And if not for the simple fact that our me deity complexes have given way for the utter disdain of the many possibilities that what we hold to be true are wrong, that the implications of that are, I don't think a lot of people know how to deal with that. We can't handle the truth because we don't want to change, or we have to come to the conclusions that we've been lied to by the very people that we hold in high regard. So when I was putting this together, I imagined an interaction looking like this. So it's as if a person who's held in high regard holds out 10 $1 bills in their right hand and then one $100 bill in their left. They say nothing at all about it, but simply allow a child whom they know to choose which prize they want. They hold out their hands, the child stands before them, they say nothing about it, the child gets to choose. What we would find more often than not, I feel, is a child would choose what he assumes to know. He thinks the answer is obvious because this person offering him said prize is held in high regard. They are trusted. So he thinks the correct choice is obvious at that point. The child then chooses the quantity of one thing because he doesn't realize that its only quantitative thing is in the manner of paper, not in the manner of value. So he then, quote unquote, trusts this person. So there's no reason to have any questions. The only question he has at that point is, why would this person of whom I and everyone else holds in high regard steer me wrong? I.e., if there were something not obvious to him, he trusts said person to make it known right out of the gate. So as a result, this poor little man won't be retiring early because he's going to pick the hand with 10 singles in it. However, if we have a child that learns to trust to an extent, and we teach the child to critically think and investigate, they will come to a conclusion that things are not always what they seem, and that sometimes the very thing that doesn't make sense is the very thing they should be striving for. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't trust. What I am saying is that we should trust, but verify. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. The truth is that if we really do want the truth in a matter, any matter, then we must be willing to lay down our own presuppositions regarding a matter that we think we know about, and then learn to ask questions that are uncomfortable and, dare I say, life-changing. So these are actions of those who are true proponents of the sciences, otherwise known as knowledge, right? And the best and brightest of minds have done so. After all, isn't the foundation of life in general that if we're not changing, we're dying? But I digress. There's a second stage to this proposed transhumanism. If we decide that the first stage is acceptable, then we must also understand that we are far from gods and more of an AI Frankenstein, and we are susceptible then to hacking and potentially a sinister global agenda brought about by the very people who haven't sacrificed anything of themselves for any reason. And then this is bringing us full circle by indicating they are the very narcissistic psychopaths mentioned at the beginning of this episode. It would be like we're living in the Matrix, but willing to act as a parasitic host, never really living and ultimately destined for death anyway. A second transcendence, per se. And if at that point, if we're destined for a second transcendence, what does that look like? If we accept all of these things, and if we're not gods, then who is? Who is? Surely, with that kind of a collective knowledge, we would come to the mathematical conclusion that there is, in fact, a divine creator, right? We don't really need a collective knowledge to come to that conclusion now. All we have to do is look outside or take a look at the fact that we have DNA, you know? You stretch out our DNA, it can, in a straight line, it goes to the sun and back 129 times, I think, or something like that. That's crazy. Let alone, get hooked up to some collective. We don't need to do that. But that brings me to my next point. An analogy I once heard puts things into perspective this way. If you have a computer with all of its components, it has the hardware that houses the software, right? And you have a flash drive, and on average, you weigh it, but on average, they're about 14 grams, brand new, right out of the package. But if you load that flash drive full with millions and trillions of dollars worth of information and then weigh it again, how much does it weigh? 14 grams. Nothing changes. If you upload it to the hard drive, it's the same thing. The mass of the components don't change. In other words, the information is priceless. It's highly valuable, but not the unit that houses it. And so then we can go ahead and say, well, let's transmit the information over the airwaves. It still weighs nothing, but the information is still highly valuable. And guess what? It still exists, even if we can't see it. So then I ask, how are we similar as human beings to that analogy? Well, that's easy. Our psyche, our soul, is the information, right? And we know that it can't be destroyed because of energy. And our bodies are the hardware, and that can be destroyed. But then where does that priceless information go? Especially if we acknowledge the fact that now it's interdimensional. Now it's not held by the hardware. So now is the point where we review our options. And if we stopped at the juncture of these two very different promises of transcendence, we can clearly see that one outweighs the other. And since it's mathematically impossible to have both, we then have to make a choice. And it's here that we really employ the use, of deductive critical thinking. Let me tell you, that's something that people today need to brush up on. Deductive critical thinking. And that is, of course, unless someone wants to live in the matrix, then if that's you, you're probably no longer listening. But if we apply reason and wisdom here, then we come to the conclusion that if there is a good transcendence as well as an equal counterpart to that, which would be an evil transcendence, because laws of balance, then if we've come this far, then it might be safe to say that these personalities of these entities themselves encompass none other than God and Satan. So you see, we can deduce by simple reasoning that one is pleasant, eternal with life, filled with all things good, pure light and love, and the other is the exact opposite, which would make it a nightmarish, eternal death that's filled with all things evil, utter darkness, and hatred. The thing is that both guarantee transcendence. Both are divinely ordained. Both offer us a choice in the matter, and both want us. So then we have to say, okay, fine, but how does all of this crazy stuff, how does it all apply to the end times? Okay. So Acts chapter 17, verse 29 says, "For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by art and man's device." So there's a couple of things here. The word technology comes from two Greek words, transliterated techne and logos. Techne and logos. If we read it in the context that Paul is writing it, this is what this verse sounds like. "For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by technology and man's device." So it's telling us not to turn God into something he's not. He is not something our imagination made up. He's not craft. Okay? And so we should not turn him into some useless idol, much like the technology of man's devices. And think about that for a second. The ancient people made their idols from gold and silver and whatever. What are our idols? Remember, we parallel ancient Israel in many ways. And so we have idols too. We just don't think of them like that because they were carrying around stone dolls and whatnot, or wooden, things. But we carry around other things. What are our idols? Do you ever leave a room without your device? Does man ever, do his business anymore without his device, his technology? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad at all. Okay. I truly believe that technology is an amazing thing. I love to learn about it. But we're on that thing so much that it distracts us to the point where we find we have no time for him because he came last and we're tired. And all of a sudden that thing just became a useless idol, right? Okay. So now for some prophecy regarding this. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. That's Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. And what do we see happening today? The words are sealed up to the time of the end. And it's the end, and they are no longer sealed. We know that this is what it says because in 1947, I believe, the caves in Qumran, they verified it for us with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Are we running to and fro? Are we able to go to Europe in like a day or whatever? Are we increasing our knowledge? Are we just about ready to pass that point? Is AI ready to pass that point of singularity on us? Is that how much knowledge? I don't know. It's kind of crazy. By the way, in order to understand the book of Revelation, you need to read the book of Daniel. You need to understand the book of Daniel. So now, how do we know what's what? If we go back to the basics of all of this and simply apply a very simple character trait to each promisor, then this simplifies the equation quite well, actually. So we know Jordan Peterson, he kind of broke it down very well by saying that by sacrificing, you then mature. And that brings about, that in and of itself brings about love for others. Okay? It benefits others. We also know that by not sacrificing of yourself, we are destined to remain narcissistic psychopaths. Okay? So here we go. Two promisors. One sacrifices himself for the sake of others, whereby indicating a mature essence of selflessness, which equates to love. The other takes for himself, whereby indicating a mature psychopathic narcissism, which ultimately equates to no love at all. And upon this conclusion, we can see how they both have made themselves known by the characteristics that they bear. A common scenario looks like this. At some point in our lives, upon feeling a sense of void and maybe even accompanied by a sense of hopelessness, we find that we're either miserable or not satisfied or desperate for some sort of divine action. Sometimes, it might look like, oh God, help me. Okay? We then begin desiring what will remedy such things. And whatever we thought we found can be the same for some and then different for others. But one thing for sure, it's always temporary unless it's one thing. It is at this very moment that both parties will spring into action because they both want to be that thing. And both will do whatever it takes to make an impact. One stands patiently outside, knocking on your door, waiting for you to open it up because he wants to bring you pizza. And the other one is sneaking around your house like a peeping Tom, stealing the credit card offers out of your mailbox, looking for an open window so he can raid your fridge while you're sleeping. They're both trying to get your attention, but one wants your attention to show you the truth, and the other wants to divert your attention away from it. One tells a story of redemption, and the other one of damnation. One wants you in chains, and the other wants to set you free. One will change you, and the other will let you die. One sacrificed, and the other one will sacrifice you. So then what do we say to these things? Do we continue on thinking that we're somehow guaranteed our next breath? Or do we wipe away the sleep from our eyes and maybe make the choice for what comes next? Do you choose to go back to sleep and forfeit yourself and your pizza for that matter? Or do you open up that door and chow on that pizza with Jesus? I mean, he likes his carbs, by the way. You know, he's keen on sharing some cheese bread with his peeps. So, I don't know. I just kind of feel like if this is a thing, right? This agenda to literally what it comes down to is putting us all under control. And the Bible talks about it, right? The Bible talks about it in Revelation. We, all under control, under their thumb. They're going to be able to, figure out where we're at. They're going to be able to figure out what we're doing, what we're spending our money on. We're not going to be able to buy or sell without taking their method of control. And so I kind of feel like with one, you've got everything to lose, and with the other one, you've got nothing to lose. So obviously, if you or anyone you know have anything to add to this, or if you have questions regarding this subject, you know where to find me. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook. Go listen and send it to your buddy. And it's End Times Now with Bry. One of them's End Times Now with Bry at protonmail.com. Okay. So that's it for today. I hope that you guys got something out of this. This was a super deep thing. My brain was rolling with this stuff because, it's deep. And who knows how they're going to roll this stuff out, right? But the bottom line is that it's a potentiality. And so we have to be prepared for these potentialities and understand what it means for us and for our family and for our friends. It's time to wake up, and it's time to shake our people awake too. So with that being said, thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. Your scripture for today is in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. And I'm pretty sure that he might have brought some pizza. Thanks a lot, guys. This is Brianna signing off. God bless.